The record price for corn on the futures market was $8.31 a bushel, set on August 21st of last year. The highest historical mark for soybeans was set August 30th, 2012 at $17.70 a bushel. After last week's mess and with a big projected crop on the horizon, both the old and new crop contracts are more than a few steps from the top. It would be hard to imagine a producer not making a profit if he or she sold at those records, but if 2013 costs are close to 2012 inputs, the break even for this year's corn and soybeans might make profitability closer than you think. Tina Barrett from Nebraska Farm Business joined us Wednesday to discuss what those margins might look like.
We went back and looked at what our 2012 costs were, because that's the best measurement we've got right now. And on average for corn, across all types of tenure types, we averaged $4 a bushel for total farm costs. That was just farm costs. That's, inputs, depreciation, utilities, but doesn't include a charge for family living or taxes. And so that, that's something that we got to figure out, like, for looking at not only breaking even from net income standpoint, but also making a profit, not showing a net worth loss. We need to factor those in, and then we're talking a little higher number.
The 4 is the average.
4 is average, and so that's another thing that you got to remember, is that when we're talking about an average number, is that half of the farms that we work with are lower than that, and half of them are higher than that. And so when I separated them out to the top 20% and the low 20%, we saw a $1.70 difference in there between $3.60 for the top 20% and $5.30 for the low 20%. And we actually would have 40% of the farms that we work with that would be losing money at today's crop prices.
Well, right. I mean, $4 would leave a lot on the bone for last year, but if you look at 2013, with the way the market is now, and presuming that there's a big crop, the input prices probably don't go down that much.
That's right. Yeah. We saw high incomes in 12. We'll see what 13 is going to bring. I just don't see we're going to see that kind of profit, and how we're going to, unless the market rallies a little bit after harvest, that we're going to see that. And so it's something I think people need to be prepared for. And as they're starting to make input decisions for 2014, they need to start thinking about that too. Is there any way that they can reduce some of those costs to help them out?
So that's in corn. As you looked at the 2012 numbers for soybeans, what were the things that you saw there?
Yeah, for soybeans, our average was $10 a bushel, which doesn't sound so bad, except when we're talking about so many less bushels per acre. Instead of in corn, we were adding about 70 cents for family living and taxes, and in beans we're talking about $2.30. We're bringing that up to $12.33 if you include all family living and taxes charges. So we're talking about a big spread there. Yeah,
and after the market eroded last week, that doesn't leave much available.
No, it doesn't. And we're assuming that, we're not seeing any significant drops in any input costs or family living and taxes for this coming year. So, maybe we haven't saw dramatic increases either, but I think those numbers are pretty solid.
If you're a farmer and, you're just kind of, you're not working necessarily with a group or cranking the numbers out, what is something that would be easy to start with, or what would be a good way to start figuring out a cost of production?
Yeah, well, if it's a strictly grain operation, it's usually fairly simple. Something that you can plug into a spreadsheet and plug your total costs for the year, and then maybe look at seed and fertilizer and chemicals, and maybe even crop insurance on a corn versus beans basis, because those are the big things that would vary. And try not to get down to too nitpicky with utilities and insurance, because it's not going to make a huge difference as you're splitting that out. If you've got a livestock operation, it makes things a little more complicated, and that we have to decide how much of that fuel went to the livestock operation, how much of it went to the crop operation. But if you sit down, with your total numbers, you can do that. I think the important thing to do is to make sure that we're not just looking at your tax return, because you might have 2 years worth of fertilizer paid for in 1 year, and you need to come down to the cost for that actual year.
The question I would ask then is, so if you figured out your break even and it's $4 and you've got everything in there, do you sell for $4.10? Do you sell for $4.20? Right? What level do you look at before you're getting too greedy?
I don't know. That's a tough decision, and marketing is such a hard thing to do. I think the thing is, if you're looking at being 5 or 10 cents away from the market price and being above it, it's time to be cautious with what you're spending, and maybe not so much looking at. A lot of your 2013 crop costs are going to be in the book. But maybe looking at 14 and saying, okay, is there anything that I can do to cut my costs to lower that and give myself a little bit more wiggle room?